We've spent a lot of time on Rocket Sloth taking a look at some of the outside the map areas from various Halo games, and we really enjoy spending our extra time breaking out of these maps and just seeing what exists beyond the walls of what typically a player is supposed to see. There's definitely something really charming about seeing some of the Bungie level designs in a different view than what maybe was initially intended. And of course, as we started playing more and more Destiny 2, we found ourselves often trying to find ways out of various levels and maps along the way as well. And not only is breaking out of sections of Destiny 2 just as fun as Halo is, but sometimes there's some bigger and even more interesting and convoluted areas you can access than something that we've covered before in the past like Halo. So we decided to turn it into a challenge. Is there actually a way that we could find a break in every single Destiny 2 raid? What can we actually find in these areas? Are there some hidden things that maybe Bungie didn't want us to see when we were out and about on the outside of these maps? So we decided to dive in and take a look. We found some really interesting stuff. We're gonna have to find a break in one way or another on the Leviathan, Last Wish, Scourge of the Past, Crown of Sorrow, and Garden of Salvation if we want to complete this challenge. We are going to be skipping the raid lairs, though we might return to them for a different video later on this month. And so if you want more Destiny 2 breaks or Halo breaks, make sure you guys are subscribed to Rocket Sloth. So first up, we jumped into the Leviathan raid, and this one was actually one we kind of somewhat knew about a little bit from a while back when we were actually running the Leviathan raid just for fun, though we didn't explore it nearly as extensively as we maybe thought we could back when we first discovered it. You see, when you're in the first courtyard section where you typically have to run the flags and defend the areas, if you go over to this little building on the side and make your way on top of the rooftop here, there's actually this gap in the geometry of the building that you could just jump right into. Now, from first glance, it looks like it's a very limited space. You really can't go too far without running into a soft barrier that gives you a countdown before you die. But upon a little bit of a closer look, we actually found that we could not only drop down to a lower area, but we could leap across this large gap and make our way all the way across to this other side that has this big open under section to the Destiny 2 raid. Now, we know already that the Leviathan raid has this very intricate underbelly system, and this is probably why we're able to even get this low on the map, as some of the ground textures are kind of expanded upon just the hallways that you typically would experience, because it's probably easier to design the level using these flat surfaces. So we're able to take advantage of these and navigate around this lower section. Fortunately enough, there are some areas you can climb onto and get up to this higher area, which let us just completely run around freely and look around at the Leviathan as a whole from this underneath section. Now, this area on the Leviathan seemed to be so open and there's so many different possibilities that if you choose to do this trick, you might want to revisit this one multiple times, because sometimes you're going to have to make a commitment to looking and exploring an area that might block you off from getting back to the outside area you were in before. So starting over a couple of times might be necessary for you. But some of the interesting things we found while we were out here were definitely getting to some of the chambers where you do various encounters for the Leviathan raid. For instance, we made our way over to the baths section, but since we were still on the outside of the level and not in the hallway, it didn't load the baths section in. So you can see the placeholders that they use here instead of the full baths section being loaded in. It's kind of interesting to see. Then if you make your way alongside the outer section, you can actually find your way in this under area that connects you to the lower section of the gauntlet. We thought it was really funny that we could actually stand in the purple smoke that is usually this death drop that we jump into whenever we're trying to wipe and reset on this one. But it's actually really cool how these sections of the level actually load in based on where you are. It's very similar to when you're playing Halo and it loads the level section by section, but since Destiny uses some advanced player migration systems over what Halo has, whenever a group of players gets split up, each player kind of gets put into their own server if they're far enough apart on different sections of the map, rather than it just teleporting all the players to wherever the map is wanting to load. So we did think that was really interesting, but we definitely see and can predict some of the level loading mechanics based off of what we've experienced when glitching out of the maps in Halo. We actually managed to to die and respawn in the gauntlet encounter, which was definitely unexpected. And since there was only 4 of us breaking out of the map that time, we actually didn't know what to do, and we kind of jokingly decided to try to 4-man it. We do think we had a strategy set up where we could have possibly done it, but it didn't work out too well for us. Now, what we learned after doing the Leviathan, some of the jumps can be kind of difficult if you are running some weird things in your class setup. And while a lot of these glitches and breakouts of the map that we're going to be going over in the rest of this video can be done with Titans and Hunters, we did find that more often than not, the best and surefire way of making sure you had the most mobility when breaking out of maps definitely was to run the top tree Dawnblade as a Warlock. Since the update earlier this year that gives Dawnblade top tree the Icarus dash, which gives you this extra little boost, when you pull your super, you can actually hit that button infinitely and drain your super instead, which can give you some vertical movement to help you get into areas you can't normally get into. Fortunately enough, you don't need anything else other than just the base Warlock class unlocked to do any of this, so it makes it really accessible. It's not like you need Worldline 0 or any type of specific weapon to do any of these glitches. You just need to pull up your Warlock and go for it. So going on to Last Wish, when we were in this chamber section with the giant taken ball things, there's yet again another section of this level that is just missing geometry that allows players, if they can get enough height and speed, to break out of this room completely. What we found is that by activating our Dawnblade, flying around the corner from this ball and going into this little gap in the wall, you can use your Icarus dash to give yourself just enough vertical movement to go to the very top section, which doesn't have a ceiling for whatever reason, and escape to the outer section of this level. This one's actually really crazy looking just because you don't normally get to see the outside section of something when you're all the way in the chamber of Last Wish this far already. It definitely is this really dreamy aesthetic going on with it, and we found that if we run over in a certain section, all of a sudden the color will load back in, but then if you run back the other way, the color will go away again. We thought that was interesting for sure. You can see a lot of different buildings in the distance, though some of them have barriers and you might die in the process. If you look over in this section, you can actually see the Riven encounter and see Riven wrapped around this pillar thing, which is kind of cool to see it from this angle. You can even see the puzzle jumping section that you do after you do some damage on Riven as well. Unfortunately, along the way, Luke and I both discovered the difficult way that these doorway column things are actually objects that you can fall into, and it can put you in a little jail trapped section. So if you're running on these objects, make sure you're careful that you don't fall all the way down into one of the columns, because otherwise you're just stuck in there, and if you kill yourself to get out, you're actually going to start the timer for a wipe. No one can revive you, though with a little bit of practice, getting that initial jump up into the spot isn't that difficult, especially if you're a Warlock. Next, we're going on to Scourge of the Past. Now this one was a little bit different, as it wasn't just a matter of geometry letting us out of the map, but more so just a barrier that is broken that you can essentially get by using Dawnblade as well. Now there's a few different ways that you can actually make your way across. You can either stand up on some cables and leap across, or you can get a little bit closer and stand on this platform and make your jump across the opening. But essentially activating your Dawnblade or just leaping very well, you can actually break through the barrier in the right corner of this doorway and essentially clear the wall and get to the outside section of the city in the first area of Scourge of the Past. Once you're outside the map, you can look around. There's a couple of little vendors over here randomly, which we thought were kind of funny, but actually you can make your way all the way under the map and land in this big half pipe looking section, which does give you a checkpoint, so if you die along the way, you can at least respawn up there. And while some of us could actually see the buildings looking completely upside down, others didn't have any of the buildings load in. Afterwards though, you can make a leap of faith and jump down into this abyss, and you can actually land on the pipes that serve as the sparrow driving section in the raid. You can run on top of them, and you can actually look through the walls in some cases, which we did think was kind of interesting. You do have to be careful because it is easy to get stuck down here by dropping a little bit further than the pipes, but for the most part, you're able to navigate quite a bit. We did find some random pieces of debris that were just laying around that we could jump on. We actually followed the pipes for quite a ways out into the far sections of the level. We did try breaking back into the level several times, but we couldn't actually find a way in. Sometimes there's like a hole in the ceiling that you can see through, and it looks promising, like it's an object you can just drop right into, but as it turns out, it's just a light source that Bungie put in and then caved it off and made it like a wall, so there would be no way way players could actually get out that way. It was really interesting, but it's a really cool thing you don't think about when you're playing through the level. You definitely think it's just outside light shining through, but it's definitely this rock wall with a light object in there, making it look like it's outside, but it's really not because we couldn't find a way back in. Crown of Sorrow definitely was another interesting one because it brought us back to the Leviathan raid, and this time it was another section of just geometry not having a ceiling in another corner. In the first encounter, if you go up to this corner over here and you kind of angle yourself just right, you can get enough upward momentum to get up into this little upper section and then drop down through the walls to get to the lower area. From there, you do have quite a few different directions you can go explore, and we kind of got split up multiple times in this area because it's very difficult to make some of the jumps you have to make, and you might accidentally fall into a different section of the level while trying to break out in one area. I had it where I fell to this far section of the level and it loaded me in this whole other area, which was cool to explore, while Luke and the rest of the group were kind of journeying to this other section and looking around out there as well. We did find it interesting though that you can load the sequence that opens up the menagerie section, which we didn't think would be something that would be fully loaded into this raid version of the level, but it looks like they must have built this whole level as one object rather than multiple different levels with reused assets. There's definitely a lot of different sections you can go explore along the way. However, you do have to be careful because you can actually end up glitching back into the level or dying and respawning in the level, and you might end up in some hallway that has you just closed off with no doors to open up. But it was really cool to see that there's this big underbelly area that you can still go explore on Crown of Sorrow. And then we got to Garden of Salvation. Now this one was one we were really optimistic on because besides the fact that this level is completely beautiful looking for a Destiny 2 raid, and there's a lot of areas we wanted to go explore, we were really surprised to find that this is a very, very carefully built raid, and Bungie did a very good job at blocking off sections that you're not supposed to go and explore on. We really struggled along the way just finding anything that we could get out on, and we were hopeful we would find something that would let us just completely break out and explore like the other levels, but we weren't so lucky on Garden of Salvation. Matter of fact, we struggled to find anything at all, and we thought that we would kind of be stuck on Garden of Salvation without finding anything to show for in a video. I mean, fortunately enough, Garden of Salvation is one of the most beautiful looking raids we've seen, and we did enjoy just exploring nonetheless, but we did want to find a little something to show at the very least. We did find one little section though. It's not the biggest area, but we did find it interesting, where if you actually ride on this wheel as if you're taking the shortcut up to the upper level, you can kind of angle how you fall and land through this little gap and drop down to the intersection of the wheel, and you can see the wheel clipping through the walls. You can see the inside section of the waterfall, and essentially it's this little area you probably weren't supposed to get into. It was kind of interesting enough, but we still weren't fully satisfied with this one. However, one of the guys in our raid group actually said he found some video somewhere and he may have found a new way to break out of Garden of Salvation. So we were really hopeful that maybe this was something big. And sure enough, if you go to the first encounter area, you can actually jump onto the little circle area and make your way onto this big wheel thing. And from there, we were able to fly across and land just right and glitch over this little ledge. And there's a small section outside of the map that you technically have access to. But then from there, we found if you drop into this giant abyss in the ground, you can actually explore this whole side section of Garden of Salvation and escape under the level as well. And while you definitely are way more limited as to where you can go in this area, it was really cool to see us kind of get in this section of Garden of Salvation we weren't initially supposed to make our way into. And there are some really cool things going on with the geometry that we couldn't quite always understand, as sometimes things would load in that are there 1 second and gone the next second. But still, nonetheless, we were happy to have made a bigger break on Garden of Salvation as well. So we were able to find breaks on all of the raid areas of this, and next we wanted to go to each planet in Destiny 2 and maybe see if it's possible to find some pretty awesome breaks out there as well, and that's something we will be covering up in the future. So if you want to see more videos like this, make sure you guys are subscribed with notifications on. You can also check out the Halo stuff we've done where we break out of Halo as well. But hey, after all of that, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe with notifications on for more videos just like this one, and you won't miss anything we upload, even if YouTube's acting all whack. Also, if you want to, you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow me at Rocket Elijah, or you can follow Luke at Rocket Sloth Luke. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time with a brand new video. Bye guys.